We are live.
Okay, welcome everybody, and I'd like to welcome any of our public that's joining us today for our December meeting. And I will call the meeting to order at 10:35 a.m. And we have opening prayer from Trustee Tugwood. Do you want to lead us in prayer, Donna?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Okay, it went off for a minute. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Loving God, Holy One. We hold in tenderness and prayer the collective suffering of our world at this time. We grieve precious lives lost and vulnerable lives threatened. We know your desire is for our wholeness and well-being. We ache for ourselves, our families, our province, our country, and our world. We know you understand our need for family and friends. Reveal to us new and creative ways to come together in spirit and in solidarity. Lord, in this holy season of prayer and song and laughter, we praise you for the great wonders you have sent us, for a shining star, an angel's song, for infant's cry in lowly manger. We praise you for the word made flesh in a little child. We behold his glory and are bathed in its radiance. Lord, strengthen those of us gathered today on Zoom and call us to profound trust in your faithful presence. Help us remember that we serve together in your name and by your call. Amen.
Amen.
By the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
It's a beautiful prayer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 1.3, our Treaty 6 land acknowledgement. We are party to Treaty 6, and as such, we wish to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples. We recognize the diversity of First Nations who have at one time lived across the territory, as well as the presence of the Métis Nation. And there's no public forum. Approve of the agendas. Additions. I do have one addition, and it would be in regards to our MLA meetings. So that is on our August work plan, but because of there was so much disruption in August, we deferred it until we were ready to speak to it again. So since we're looking at our sister board and our municipality, connecting with those two groups, I thought we could add that in there as well. So that is 6.8. So if we just want to add MLAs to that as well, please, Kim. And Ed, I guess. Any deletions? Under committee reports, I don't believe there's an audit report. Is there a finance report, Trustee Tugwood? No. Labor report, 5.3.
Just a quick comment.
Okay, so we'll leave it on. 5.4 student review, no. 5.5 TBAC, no. Long range planning. Okay, policy. Trustee Svidich is not here today, but we are reviewing policies at the beginning of the meeting. Is there anything else?
No, we have those policies to review.
Okay, so we can take off the committee report. And that would be it. Okay, so could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Can somebody make that motion, please? Trustee Tugwood moves.
I'll make
to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that is carried unanimously. 2.1, minutes of November 27th. Are there any comments or questions? Revisions? I just had one question about those minutes. And just when we approved the education plan, did we need a date in there? Like, was it the 2020 education plan?
So the reason why we don't have a date in that is the education plan is a term plan. So it wouldn't be the same as the AERR where it
Okay.
does have a date.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So is there anybody willing to make the motion to approve the November 27th meeting minutes as presented? Trustee
Yes.
Afon moves.
Madam Chair, yeah, and I'll make that motion that we approve the minutes from November 27th.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Okay, 3.0 board priorities. Are there for us? And action items, 4.1, policy 2, role of the board. Since Trustee Spidich is not here, does somebody from policy want to review this? So that would be, okay.
Can do that, Madam Chair. So before you is the role of the board. You look at, because of the changes that came with the new Education Act, if you look at 1.3, that is now strike out because it's no longer relevant as is. But however, we do know that we've encouraged or talked about that we need to always continue to educate our ratepayers that they are aware of this right. Believe the 7.6 and that came out of our evaluation when we did talk about that, and it's not in our purview, but we need to encourage the superintendent to properly plan in regard to succession for the division. So that is in his purview.
Okay, I do have a question about that,
Oh, sorry.
7.6. So
go ahead.
is there, what does that change exactly for, like in any other way? Are there any consequences to that change for our work or our opportunity? So this would be for Charlie, I guess, when we do have that opportunity to be on the panels for assistant superintendents and principals.
Yes, we always will have that panel. That is our support to him when those opportunities come that he may invite us to support it for him. But if
okay,
not,
so there's no change there.
No, but it is in his purview, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I kind of saw that maybe there was a link between that opportunity for trustees and 7.6. So,
Charlie, do you want to add some more clarification?
I'd say there's no active role by the board in succession planning. There is an active role in hiring of senior administration, but not in succession planning.
right. Okay.
That's why it's removed.
And then 8.3, we struck that out. Again, the background is that we do not use this order. Okay, one sec. I believe that's it. Any question?
I have one question. Did we at one time approve policies as per Robert's Rules of Order? I mean, it was in here, so that must have been at one time.
Charlie?
Yeah, Charlie, go ahead.
Oh, Madam Chair, there actually are no Robert rules of passing motions, so we're not sure where that came from. So Ed and I did a review of that, and there are no procedures in Robert's rules in this respect. So I don't know where it came from.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. So this will be the second and the third reading, Madam Chair, simply because when we looked at those were some discussions we've had, and typically we don't like putting all three resolutions together, but it makes sense. These are minor changes to this policy. So we can do second and third if you will allow us to.
Okay, are you making that motion then?
Yes, Madam Chair,
Renee?
that the board give policy 3 role of the trustee, second and third reading as presented, and that the revised policy now be in effect for the division.
Okay, I think you meant to say role of the board rather than role of trustee, but
No, role of the board.
as presented there. Okay. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Okay, 4.2, role of the trustee. Trustee Afon, you want to continue on?
Yeah, 1 second uploading that. And again, based on our last board self-evaluation, we've added in there that the board, that's number 4, the board will assign new trustees a mentor, which we all did agreed on that based on the work we do when we have new trustees join us, new trustees come on board, they should be able to have some opportunity and support. And when we assign a mentor, that will enhance their learning and support for the work we do, which is a very good practice that is being shared around major organizations. Okay. Believe that is the only change that we brought in there, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
Is there any questions?
Okay, so there's no, I don't see anybody with any comments or questions. Are you willing to make that motion, Trustee Afon?
Yes, Madam Chair. That the board give policy 3, role of the trustee, second and third reading as presented, and that the revised policy now be in effect for the division.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, 4.3, committees of the board.
Donna, do you want to take this?
I'm not on the policy committee, but I
Oh.
can if you want me to.
Yes,
Sorry
I think
then.
it's
Oh,
Trustee
sorry.
Sirwa. Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah, sorry, Trustee Sarah. Do you want to take this?
You're muted, Trustee Sirwa.
Okay, policy 8 committee of the board, that the board give policy 8 committee of the board second and third reading as presented, and that the revised policy is in effect.
Do you want to go through the changes first, please?
Henry, can you go
Aye.
ahead? I just have to grab my book.
Okay, sorry. No, don't worry then. So this again, Madam Chair, from our audit committee, the initial wording that came with the act changed. So then that when that changed and when we put together our composition, we have to reflect and rechange that. So we did make those changes that instead of from the adults and the professional community, that was changed to public members of the community. So those were the changes, and they came with that came with this. And then one more, let me see. Yeah, and we fulfilled those obligations as is right now, that the board will appoint 2 public members from the committee to a 2-year term with the date of appointment for up to 2 consecutive years. So then these are just all falling in line with our our rationale and policy for the audit, the new
For
audit
the audit
committee.
committee.
Yeah.
Okay, So trustee Siroy, you made that motion?
Yes,
Okay. Any comments or questions from anybody?
I have
Trustee
one
Tuckwood?
Yeah, I have one question. Where does it say there will be 2 members from the community?
It's 8.3.
Because
8.3,
8.3,
second
I
bullet.
guess I'm not reading that. Oh, I see. I see it. All right. Sorry, I thought it was crossed out. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
2
Thank you.
public members. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
I
Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. 4.4, board delegation of authority.
Second, I'm loading that up. Trustee Sarah, you want to take that? And then we'll finish it. I'll finish the last one, please.
okay. That the board give policy 11, board delegation of authority, first and second reading as presented.
So again, just confirming the changes there.
The highlighted, the yellow.
Yeah, the Education
Yeah,
Act. Is that what you mean, Sir Henry?
yes, yeah, just confirmation that we're referencing the Education Act.
Rather than the School Act. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that is carried unanimously. 4.5, hearings on teacher matters.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, again, on the very first line, we just added quoting the Rights Act, the section of the act, to make it easier for reading as to when somebody grabs it, read it, what is relevant. The section that is relevant is now being quoted out there, being mentioned. Then if you come down to 11.2, we broaden that up as to when there's going to be an adjournment, that a proper process be followed. So this just clarifies, gives us more clarification as to when we're going through an adjournment. So what I can do is, if I can give maybe a minute or a second to look at that change, and if there are any questions. Okay. Again, this again clarify our role as being neutral when we have such circumstances, right? So both parties will be present, and then the proper process be revealed to both parties at the same time. So if there are no questions, Madam Chair, that will be the first reading.
Okay, are you making that motion,
Yes,
Trustee
please.
Eflin? Okay.
Yeah, I'm making that motion that the board give policy 14, hearing on teacher matters, first reading as presented.
Okay, any comments or questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Trustee Sarah, you might want to finish the last one, please.
Trustee Siroy, you are muted. Yeah, if you just want to go through the changes first and then the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we didn't really make very much change. Excellent Catholic teacher. that was there, but we didn't want it. We didn't have any other changes that the board give policy 17 Catholicity and Catholic lifestyle first and second reading of the lifestyle.
Okay, so it's 6.2 where the change went to the referencing teachers and administrators. And
That teachers may refer resources developed and shared by the Director of Faith, Life, and Religious Education as they plan and deliver curriculum, content, and courses throughout the school day.
right, and then there's the reference to the 2 documents, excellent in Catholic leadership and excellent in a Catholic teacher. Those are both the CCSA documents that we're referencing there.
Doing that to be very specific, so
Yeah.
that it's not vague. Yeah.
So just a question. So we're adding administrators and it wasn't there before. So teachers and administrators. Is that correct?
Yes.
We're adding that word administrators.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if the 2 documents that are referenced there, if they were considered as an appendix rather than just a reference. Did the policy talk about that at all?
No.
No,
Oh, sorry. No, we consider them as part of, because they are new documents. Are you thinking we should consider them as an appendix?
Well, I'm just wondering, it just gives them more, then they're more available, right? People don't have to go look for them. They're important documents that were just created. And most likely there is going to be one for trusteeship. And most likely we will put that in as an appendix in policy. So I'm wondering if policy would like to go back and just reconsider that, those 2 documents as appendixes rather than just references.
Okay, we can do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can take it back and reconsider it, see who appendix it. And
Okay,
and
so
one
we'll
of the
leave that
reasons-
one to bring back.
One of the reasons, like I'm saying, now that you've jigged that thought, if one comes for trustees again, and we do add it on here, then again, yeah, so as
Yeah.
an appendix is easily available. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
I mean, I don't know how long the documents are, but maybe there's an executive summary that could just be the appendix or,
We'll
or-
do that.
Yeah, something to look at.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 4.7, general elections, and this would be our Ed, Secretary Treasurer, to lead us through this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Try to be brief. Most of the verbiage is already in the backgrounder. There have been changes with regards to the Local Authorities Election Act. The most significant one, and it affects some of the timelines, is they've expanded the nomination period. And so the division is able to accept nominations starting January 1st, of course, up to the nomination day. But then also potential candidates can then rescind their nomination at any point during that period. Nomination day is September 20th. So that is still in legislation in terms of when the official nomination day is, but now the period is expanded. Instead of a few weeks prior to nomination day, it's now all the way from January 1st. So as a result, of that change to the legislation, I think there's another number of subsequent changes to legislation. One is with regards to the appointment of a returning officer. With that, if we're going to start receiving nominations for January 1st, we should have a returning officer in place. By default, the board secretary is the returning officer, but we have in the past have appointed the secretary treasurer formally as the returning officer. The one thing that is new in legislation is that they also have provisions for the board to appoint a substitute returning officer. And I think it's just that the returning officer has certain duties and responsibilities that can't be delegated out to a deputy. So they've made provisions for a substitute in the event the returning officer is incapacitated. So as I said before, in the past, the board has appointed the secretary treasurer. With regards to the role of the director of business and finance, they act in the absence of the secretary treasurer. In regards to the appointment, my recommendation is that the board appoints that individual as the substitute returning officer in the event that the returning officer is incapacitated. Other changes within the legislation also discuss disclosure of campaign contributions and expenses. The board may pass a bylaw, and again, this has to happen before the nomination period, if they wish to put a limit on campaign expenditures that is less than what is set out in regulation. What is interesting is that there is no regulation currently in place. So looking at that as a kind of what our past has been or past experiences have been, I don't believe that there's been an issue with people spending huge amounts of money on campaigning that may require to level the playing field by issuing a limit in terms of how much could be spent. So I'm not recommending that there's being a bylaw. I don't see a need for it to be moved forward in that regard. In regard to the number of electors required on nomination papers, again, by bylaw, the board could increase the number of people to sign on a nomination form from 5. Again, we haven't had any issues in past experiences. And in my view and my opinion, that increasing the number of nominations may even be perceived as a barrier for receiving nominees. So I'm at this point recommending that there's no bylaw enacted in that regard. Also, before December 31st, the location and time for receipt of nominations. This just allows for the returning officer by board resolution to delegate, or by bylaw, I should say, delegate the returning officer to establish other points that we can receive nomination papers. The legislation specifies that it's at the central office for the local authority that nominations are received. Typically in our past, what we've done is expanded that to receive nomination periods at the school level. I don't think it's necessary for us to be receiving them on January 1st, but at some point in the future, as the election date and nomination dates get closer, we'll look to expand that so that it's in line with what we've done in the past, which is receive nomination papers at a more local location. With that in mind, we have a bylaw already in place back in 97, 98 that does remain in effect. It is not, was not time dependent for a particular election, that allows for the receipt of nomination forms in other locations as determined by the returning officer. So with regards to that legislation, that already is in play. Agreements to conduct an election, and this is by resolution. That you may enter into agreements with other authorities to conduct an election on our behalf. This serves us in twofold. One is that we don't have to designate resources in terms of training and acquisition of people at polling stations. We use the staff of our partner municipalities in this regard, as well as using their places if people are voting in a municipal election, as well as for school board trustee. It's far more convenient if they don't only have to go to one place. We currently have, or have had in the past, agreements with 12 local municipalities. And these have been executed by the Secretary Treasurer as new or amended contracts arise. Given the number of areas that we're involved in, I'm again asking you to approve continuing to partner with these communities, delegating authority to the Secretary Treasurer to execute such agreements. Just kind of flying through here. So there are 2 proposed motions, one dealing with the returning officer and the substitute returning officer for the 2021 general election. The second is the authorization of the returning officer to enter into agreements with other authorities. I'm not sure if there's any questions on those points. There are other items with regards to the general election that I have not brought forward. And I'll prepare a fuller background as we deal with those items or in discussion with the board chair and vice chair in terms of what is moving forward based on our past experiences.
Thank you. Trustee F1?
So, Mr. Laka, a quick question there. Our partner municipalities, are they ready to start accepting nominations? Do you know, or how prepared are they?
They are prepared to accept nominations for their elected officials.
Okay.
They typically do not accept nominations on our behalf.
No, yeah, I don't know that, but how prepared are they? I'm just asking how prepared are they?
There's a wide range. Everybody has to be prepared for January 1st, regardless of what their level of preparedness is. One municipality, as I was kind of preparing some communications out and looking at how we might handle communications for nominations. One municipality has everything outlined on the website already, including changes in requirements, additional forms, as well as the nomination papers. To other municipalities where there's no presence on their website. And in discussion, it's basically that, yes, if somebody comes in to request a nomination, they get a nomination paper as well as the outline of the requirements for campaign funds and expenditures.
Okay, all right then. So my colleagues, I will just ask that we need to look at timelines, even though there's these timelines. Now that we know some are already beginning to, and if we're in partnership with such municipalities, then we should have a timeline. And I'm proposing maybe February then to start campaigning this out to our communities. So then that it falls in line with all those partners. And if they can help us advertise it, then good for us. Like you said, if some have it already on their website, then again, that enhances and then directs them either back to central office or to the school site so that we can have willing participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Afon. So I did have that same comment or question, like how does the board want to go forward with a timeline or a process for elections? Because it is extended now. And I think there's going to be a lot more to elections than there has been in the past with a 6-month window. And I think there's going to be some provincial items in nature that are probably going to be coming forward. So
the province has issued a number of documents with regards to the election, especially with changes to the Local Authorities Act, as well as kind of extensively tried to brief municipalities and school authorities on the limitations and expectations through the legislation on campaign contributions and expenditures. It's probably one of the most significant for people seeking election in local governments.
Yeah, and I believe in the bigger centers like the city, you do have like 10 people signing your nomination paper. Definitely in the bigger centers. So in smaller centers, the way we are, I don't see any need for change to that. But just going back to the timeline, Trustee F1, like what do you see the needs for trustees to be involved at this point? Just hand it over to administration to make sure that we're cooperating with the municipalities, we're getting the best deal for advertising, we're included, on whatever platforms for awareness for our constituents.
Yes, as well. And then we have to think about our local electors at the parishes. So we will need to, like you said, let's go through these proposals, but I would like us to have a firm date if we want to do 6 months in, or we want to start in March, and then administration has the guidance as to from March they are engaging with all our partners to ramp up the ad and support for the coming election.
Yeah, I think it's at the parish level, make sure we have some kind of communication that's, we're informing our parishioners. So is this something that we can ask admin just to come back with, like a timeline of what will happen?
Are you looking for basically a communication plan then for the election?
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. But I think, Madam Chair, we should. What is the rest of the trustees saying, Donna and Liz? Do we want to start in March, or do we want to tag up to the 1st January? Which, like I'm saying, there's no rush for the 1st January, but there's so much going on already. But it come the spring, March makes sense. Then we can start progressing until October.
Yeah, I think in February there is going to be some support from ASBA. So out of that, so March would be a good time to start a communication plan for sure.
Yeah, typically we would kind of parallel both ACSTAs, any kind of
And
communication
ASBA.
about, and as well as the ASBA. So if trustees have an idea of their timelines, then we can start including that in terms of making sure that we get the best bang for our buck.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was
Trustee
just going to
Sarah?
say, sorry, I was just going to say, yes, March sounds reasonable.
Okay,
Rather than
Trustee
January.
Tugwood? Yeah.
I
Trustee
was going to
Tugwood?
agree with that I think March is fine. I don't think we should start in January. It's not a good time for it.
Okay. So yeah, March 1st it is. Admin, yeah, to start gathering some of those information and moving on with it. Okay. Now we have the
Okay.
motions.
Yeah, there's 2 motions there. So the first one, is there somebody willing to make that motion in
I
regards
can make
to
the first
appointing?
motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Trustee Efron, if you could read out the motion, please.
That the board appoints Mr. Edward Latka, Secretary Treasurer, as the returning officer, and Ms. Sedelia Ausland, Director of Finance, Financial and Business Services, as the substitute returning officer for the 2021 general election as per Section 13 of the Local Authorities Election Act.
Okay, any comments or questions? I'll call the question then. All those in favor?
Aye, Madam Chair.
Okay, and that's carried unanimously. And the second motion in regards to entering into agreements with other authorities. Trustee Tugwood moves, if you could read out the motion, please.
That the board authorize the returning officer to enter into agreements with other elected authorities whose boundaries may or may not be continuous with the division to conduct elections on behalf of the division.
Okay, any comments, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, 4.8, budget update.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. It's Ed, the talking head today, it appears. With regards to the budget, the division does no longer submit a formal revised budget for the fall, even though we undertake administratively to have our schools and other operations look at the start of the school year. Of course, we've got contingencies in place if there's unexpected circumstances. We've also had additional grant funds awarded. So what we've done is we've combined the first quarter financial report with the revisions to the budget that have been undertaken by administration. Now, some of those things in that revised fall budget have already been approved by the board. For example, the expenditure plan for the federal safe return funds, $1.571 million there. That plan was approved fairly early on in this school year as we were implementing the use of those dollars. Other changes in our grant funding that weren't anticipated was that we're now in the receipt of targeted grants. The example of that is grant funding through the federal government and First Nations bands, referred to as the Jordan's Principle. And in those cases, the division has no discretion on how those funds are used. They are dictated by the terms of the grant itself. So there's not a lot of discretion or for the board in directing how those funds are utilized. But of course, one of the key assumptions was that our operations would resume traditionally and with no restrictions. As I said in my report, that's not been the case. So as a result of, especially on the restriction side, in terms of what schools are able to do, the biggest change that we found in the fall update is a number of, most of our schools have revised their projected fee income or sales revenues as their activities have become restricted under the pandemic response. And as a result, we've got not only lower revenues, but we've lowered our expenditures in those same areas because of that. Also, as a result of the current pandemic, as we've discussed with the board previously, our enrollments overall are down. Now, funding from the province was determined in the spring, so that funding remains unchanged at this point. But our funding for First Nations students who are funded through their band or the federal government, they actually pay a tuition. And that tuition rate is determined through our educational services agreement. What has happened, of course, is not only is our regular populations down, but also the number of students that we were anticipating from First Nations is lower as well. How that has impacted us is that we are short now about $201,000 out of our budget as a result of that decrease in projected enrollments coming into the fall. So what we are looking for is support from the board to access unrestricted net assets because of that lost revenue. At the end of the year, with changes in our revenue, what we've expected for changes in our expenditures, the ending balance for unrestricted net assets is projected to be at the end of this year, $846,000, a net decrease of 146 from the year-end balance. One of the things that we also have is our school-based operating reserves, as we indicated in the audited financial statements. There was a positive financial impact of not having in-person instruction in the spring. Our school-based reserves are substantially higher than what we had anticipated in the spring. Schools are now either utilizing those additional funds that they didn't anticipate in their budgets, or maybe using that to cover off deficits that they had incurred. We're attempting to do some recovery over this year, but maybe could fully recover it. So those are some of the things that have changed on the fall budget. Our spring budget had a deficit of $151,000. Most of that is related to expenditure of school-based reserves. This would increase under the fall budget to $565,000 as a result of that spending and the loss of revenues from federal tuition. Now, changes in legislation means that we require the minister's prior approval before we can access those funds. We have approval for the deficit of 151. What we'd be seeking is approval to utilize those operating reserves and unrestricted net assets to the $565,000 level from the minister. And that's the wording of the recommendation and proposed motion for the board is indicating that. Now, with our fall budgets, we've already advised schools that we have this formal process of seeking permission from the minister, and have advised them to restrain their spending of those additional amounts until we have ministerial approval. By my discussions with officials at Alberta Education, The submission is relatively simple, and I think they are trying to make sure that there's a fairly quick turnaround on either approval or further questions from the minister on our submission. So that's sort of the big update from the quarterly financial report in terms of budget changes. With the actual quarterly report, again, with the fine print, I'll be working with the Finance Committee. I actually want to change, not necessarily the entire report, but certainly my presentation of it. There might be an easier way to present this information to trustees. One of the things that's of interest that for trustees, I think, is, and we highlighted this in our audited financial statements, is the revenues received thus far on property taxes. What has occurred because of the COVID pandemic response is that a number of municipalities, if not all, have delayed the payment of taxes. And so the resultant has been that any monies that we receive from municipalities for property taxes has also been deferred. And we're in the process of playing catch up because that deferral pretty well ends across the board at December 31st. So even though that figure looks substantially lower than where we would anticipate, I think it bears witness because of how we've highlighted it, or at least bears comment that we've actually, that should catch up by the second quarter for our financial information. And then on the very last page of that second attachment, Appendix D, again, rolls out how the school-based reserves are changing as a result of the fall budget update, as well as the change in our net assets as a result of utilizing funds for funding shortfalls from the federal tuition. I know there's a lot of information there, but a lot of it becomes very detailed, and I can talk for a very long time on it. At the first quarter, sort of an introductory quarter. It also has some skewed because a number of things are either upfronted. We may get grants like our nutrition program grant might be upfronted. So we get all of our grant all at once. So it skews the revenues, especially in the first quarter. It looks quite a bit skewed, as well as some of our expenditures are upfronted, especially items that are licensing or membership are upfronted in that first quarter. So the percentages, I think, are reasonable in most cases for where we're at, given that there is some skewing because of those one-time expenditures earlier in the school year. So that's what I have, as brief as I could be, but hopefully providing enough information. Are there questions?
Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you. Trustees, do you have any comments or questions? I guess, sorry, go ahead, Trustee Afon.
Mine will be a comment. Again, just a reminder to trustees. Like Eddie explained, I do know from firsthand that a lot of our registrations are down, and especially because of the COVID issue on especially some of our communities and our First Nations communities, they are very much, school attendance hasn't been a priority, because if a household is suffering, you know, school just becomes the secondary, as well as with all the COVID situation that we are all under. We know there's so much limitation at the school sites. Native Vanbright is happening to bring in money and all of that. So definitely revenues will be down. Student populations are down as well. So all of this is therefore then affecting the bottom line as to how we are operating. At the end of the day, we need to operate and the bills keep coming, but we don't have enough bodies to support our operations. So we do know that. So just a reminder. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess the one cost that we're unsure of, or how that's going to roll out, are sub costs, and just wondering if how that is going. Like, is it on track? Is it what was expected, or can it can it still be one of, is it very variable? Like I'm sure it's hard to answer.
I know I talked with the superintendent on this item. We are actually tracking lower at this point than what we expected. Certainly what we've allowed for substitute costs. At this point, looks like we're at worst, we're on target, I think. But again, as things roll out, I'm not sure, I can't say for certain, but right now, it looks like we have put aside or sufficiently budgeted for our substitute cost moving forward.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. Trustee Tugwood?
I'm curious as to the higher grades that are doing online teaching right now, has there been any substitute costs with them? Or is it just not an issue at all now for grades 7 to 12?
I'm going to have to defer to my colleagues and the school ops or the superintendent on how they operationalize with the at-home learners and substitutes.
Charlie, go ahead.
So in response to that, Trustee Tugwood, I would say that there are no subs that we're aware of right now, because most of the time teachers are able to still teach from home. If they have symptoms, where before they were getting a sub, we had to isolate classes in that demographic, which we don't have to anymore. So the sub costs for these 4 weeks where we have online learning will be pretty much negligible.
That's kind of what I thought would happen. I just was curious. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? And thank you for pointing out the property tax line as well, Ed. I did notice that it was down, so it is curious, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a good line for us to be aware of. So trustees, just a reminder that the reason for the motion that we have to proceed with, it's because of Bill 5 that came out in the spring, and government is wanting approval of school board use of operating reserves. It's their oversight. They're doing this for 2 years, and we have to. They want to know the. It's their fiscal preference to have a look at how school boards are doing in this change that we've gone through COVID and the funding change as well. So anyhow, at the end of 2022-23, there will be, government has said there will be a cap on reserves. So they want to be able to proceed in that way after 2 years. So the motion is there, and thank you for the presentation. And we know that absolutely the dollars are tight, and I guess we did have some savings from the spring that we're able to use. So is there somebody willing to make that motion for 4.8?
Donna, go ahead.
Okay, Trustee Tugwood, if you could read the motion, please.
That the Board of Trustees approve the projected deficit of $565,217 based on revenues of $52,447,288 and expenses of 53. That's not thousand.
Yeah, millions.
Million. Should I read that again? 12,505, and request the permission of the minister for the use of operating reserves.
Okay, any further comments?
$52,447,288.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments or discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that is carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. So when you proceed with that application, is there an explanation, like you'll give the rationale as was presented?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll probably put that in a covering letter as well as the document. It's actually one of the attachments that was submitted with the spring budget that they asked that the one form be resubmitted to the department staff to move forward to the minister.
okay. Do you need the board's motion that will go in the letter and from the board chair, or does it go, is it strictly administration that?
I will double check with them. I may ask for the board chair to sign the letter because it would be addressed to the minister.
Right, okay, good. Okay, thank you. So, I guess we can go ahead and to committee reports, or do we need a short break before we continue on? Everybody's good to continue? Okay,
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll suggest we continue and
Okay.
maybe about 10 to, and then take that lunch break as well.
take lunch, okay. So 5.3. Trustee Afon? Oh, sorry, you're muted. Trustee Afon?
Okay, sorry. Due to the health restriction and the environment in which we are, ATA and TIBA have come to a mutual agreement that they are no longer meeting until next year. So they've scheduled 2 meetings coming up in January 26 and 27 to continue with labor
Okay.
discussions, negotiations at the time. As well, just 1 second. Yeah. There was a survey that was strictly to superintendents. Charlie and Sean must be aware of that with regard to how things have been between the engagement between ATA and the conversation that has been going on about in the past few weeks about COVID and other things there. So those were the surveys for the 2, and that's it for anything labor relations that I know of.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions for Trustee Afon? Okay, Trustee Tugwood?
I just have a question about the labor meetings in January. Are those meetings that we will be attending as part of the labor committee?
No, that's the negotiations between ATA and the lead TIBA group. So Scotland is the government group and ATA.
So it's not our
No,
committee?
it's not our meeting. No, it's not
Okay.
our meeting. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, thank you. 5.6, Trustee Zerwa?
Okay, we had our long-range planning meeting on December the 9th. And in our positive path forward, we continue to focus on the capital planning and related advocacy. In regards to the Catholic High School in Beaumont, we're going to go through the school council, and we're going to be asking the need, explain the need and the obstacles to CTK. So school councils will be involved in that. And second thing was the First Nations representation of the board. So in January, at the next meeting, we'll talk about, if we want the FNMI trustee and the benefits. And Charlie will prepare some background for that also. And that's about it. Any questions?
Okay.
Trustee Afon?
So I heard with the Beaumont High School, do we have any communication plan? Are we planning on having a communication plan when we start going forward in that process?
Yes, Henry, what we are communicating to the government via parents. We'll be sending a letter to the city of Beaumont, and in January, we will be arranging a meeting with the city of Beaumont as well.
Okay, but I'm talking about the parents' involvement.
Well,
we going-
first of all, we're going through these school councils, and they're going to be sending a letter out to all the parents. That's the first step. And then after that, we will have more parental advocacy with sending a letter out, and the parents can sign the letter, and we will send it on to the mid-government. That's the plan.
All right then. So what I will encourage is that we engage with our parents, that when we do engage with them, we have we've itemized their needs and the barriers that is needing for that high school. Okay.
Right.
Then my other question is, was there any talk about the portables? Was there any talk about the portables for the high school in Wetaskiwin?
None at all. We didn't talk about that at all, Henry. It never came up.
Okay. I believe that's one of our second priority, that is on long range planning. We know things have stalled with government, but we need to start talking about that as well, because if they can build, they can send us a portable. So please, I recommend that next meeting, if you guys can put it up on your agenda, to see how do we roll that as well into it. Okay,
We'll put
thank
that
you.
on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes, please.
Okay, so trustee Sirwa, I
Yeah.
would, I was at that long range planning meeting, so I would recommend that you ask the board if they're in agreement with the plan of those actions that you just talked about.
Is everybody in agreement with that?
So you do have, like from the minutes,
Mhm.
you do have some points there, but I think the board needs like more around the plan of what, or the advocacy plan, I guess. Like perhaps a timeline.
Can we, Madam Chair,
Yes,
if
go
I
ahead.
may, are we able to look at the plan we used previously in Beaumont and Leduc, as well as Lacombe? Because we had it specifically in some timelines.
Mhm.
Are we able to dig that out and look at those plans? That would be a good plan to look at. So if administration can look through that and get us those plans, so then we can look at it and follow that. That will be like Madam Chair is saying, we've had some timelines in the past. In the next 2 months, this is what we're doing. In the next 3 months, this is what we're doing. And that gave us a very focused timelines and planning going forward. So if we can look at that and use it, that would be great, because we already have plans around that we've used.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Henry. And Michelle did bring up about the postcards and a couple of ideas, but
Yeah, so
we didn't really follow through with it.
So if, like at this table, the board can recommend that from the recommendations from long range planning, that we move forward with some of those ideas, but more of a definite plan with a timeline. Once you get your feedback from your school council,
Mhm.
then maybe formalize a timeline of advocacy for Beaumont with administration.
Okay,
Would that
that's a good
seem,
idea.
would that seem fair?
Yeah, that's fair. We'll definitely do that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go
Just
ahead.
Point of clarification, I'm hearing two different processes between what was just mentioned and what Henry, trustee Effon, is proposing.
Yes, so we can also use the advocacy plan from Father Lacombe as part of a reference.
But
Because
is
it
that
gave
to
good
go to,
good
is
time.
that to go to long range planning or to back to the board as a whole?
Madam
Go
Chair,
ahead,
if I
trustee
may.
Efron.
So I recommend we speak with parents. So let's formalize that process with parents. And then once we've gotten enough information, then kick it back to the advocacy plan we did for Father Lacombe or Father Leduc, and then bring it back to the board, and then we approve it and then move that process within those timelines, because we have from February to June, right? So we can quickly move within those timelines.
Okay. Sounds good.
Does that help,
Yeah.
Charlie?
So if I just to make sure I understand, I'm going to capture it here in the action plan is Trustee Sirois will follow her process with parents. And then we'll take that feedback. We'll compare it with an advocacy plan that we've used previously, Father Lacombe as an example, and then we'll bring that back to the board for approval.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Right. And then,
Okay,
Mr. Bouchard, Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes, go ahead.
I would have wished we've developed the parent engagement questionnaires, right, in conjunction with our communication, because if we do engage with them, we needed some of those data to back the letters and the structure or the process that we are going to be pursuing. So are we able to gather some questions? 5 questions will be good, right, to get a sentiment from the community, and then kick it back here in January, February quickly, so then we have the plan to move forward on.
Madam
Trustee
Chair.
Sirois?
Yes, we already have the questions, Henry. We had 2 questions that were suggested. And it was the need for the Catholic high school, why, and what were the obstacles to going to CTK? These were the 2 questions brought forth that we were to ask the school council and the parents.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's engage. Yeah, let's engage and gather those data and then move the process forward as soon as we can, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, is that enough for you, Charlie?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, good. What about the consultation? I thought we were going to be talking about that consultation day from the long range planning.
Yes, Madam Chair, the education plan and the annual education results reporting planning. We do need to discuss that. We had a few options to postpone it, survey the staff, administrators, teachers, EAs, students, priests, parents, parish workers, the list goes on. Or last choice, a viral consultation via Zoom. So do we want to talk about that now?
Sure. Yep,
Okay.
we can go around and just to frame it, just a reminder that our consultation process, we had agreed upon a community consultation process in our 2nd and 4th year. And again, the new assurance model is all about engagement, right? There's lots of consultation, lots of engagement with our stakeholders. And so this is important. It's important to government, and it's part of our job as trustees to carry out that consultation process. So it definitely, there's some challenges with how to do that in these times. So anyhow, we'll just open up the discussion, and Trustee Sirois put a few options out there, and we can get a feel of what everyone's thinking about or how we want to go ahead with consultation. Trustee Efron?
Madam Chair, just like you've alluded to, the assurance model was very clear about parental involvement, and that was pretty much one of the building blocks. So I will probably, looking at the circumstances and the conditions under which we are operating right now, and I believe we will have the opportunity to host maybe a half a day, 2 half days, to gather some sentiments. And it could be, look at our stakeholders, right? And put up half a day for a group, or half an evening for a group for 3 hours, and then half a group for another 3 hours. And then follow it up with a general survey with probably, again, about 5 questionnaires to our school communities, to our parents. Gather all those data and then give us a way forward as to, in terms of our budget planning in the spring. And then that will come together because of these conditions that we are, then that will probably make much more sense, because the willingness is, have we engaged? Yes. Participation, we wouldn't worry about that, but have we engaged? Yes. This is what we got, this is what we heard, we are moving forward. But the question is, have we engaged? So I will encourage, if we can look at such a plan, that would be great.
Okay, Trustee Tugwood, do you have any comments?
Henry, are you talking about doing virtual meetings with the stakeholders?
Yes.
In-person meetings, like
No, virtual.
virtual meetings?
Virtual, like 3 hour virtual with a section of the stakeholders, another 3 hours with a section, right? And then now send out the entire survey to the entire student population, right? Our families. And then we've done our due diligence of engaging, because these circumstances, we just can't meet here and there, but we've done our due diligence by trying to reach out in whatever means that we are able to, right? So if we do 2 evenings, we wouldn't take much away from a lot of our stakeholders who probably are working during the day and here and there. And then we limit to a 3 hours or 2 hours frame, right? That would be plenty to have some meaningful discussions for 2 sessions, 2 different groups.
So I really see the value of the survey. I'm just wondering, I know some of our community members that came probably would not do a Zoom meeting. They just, I know it from that they can't do it with some of the groups I belong to, but certainly others would be able to do that. And we have the option of going to breakout rooms. So then you can get into smaller groups and come up with some ideas, as we did with ACSTA, I think it was.
Right.
So I think.
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, but I believe we have to try it, right? We have to try to see who are unable to participate, right? At least we've tried. But if we said they can't, I don't think that would be a good argument, because the assurance model is very clear that consultation is a pillar of it.
So you don't think just doing a survey would be enough?
No.
No. Okay.
I think that the survey is helpful for some things, but consultation is engagement, right? It's the conversation, you know, so to properly consult and engage, or you have to engage, you have to have the conversation. So, so I'm hearing, Trustee Sirois, and how are you feeling about the, like a consultation process?
Well, Madam Chair, what I'm thinking is, in this pandemic, I think that staff, administrators, parents, they're not in a position where they want to do more Zoom meetings. I think these are not normal times, so the normal thing isn't happening. I think we postpone this to a later date.
So the timeliness of consultation is important, because we have to do it before the end of March, because it really is part of our budgeting and our making sure that we're going to meet our goals for next year, so our division goals. So we can't postponing it won't work. But what we can do, we all have concerns. We know, about the situation we're in for sure. But what we can do is ask for Charlie to come back with a proposal of what a consultation process could look like. That's not tasking on people and the situation that we're in, I guess. So I am in agreement that we still need to consult with our stakeholders. I think there might be something that comes out of the situation that we're in that we really need to hear from our stakeholders, and then a year later, then we hear back from our stakeholders, well, you didn't even ask us about that, or, we look at our results, right? And we start working, looking for consultation on our results that we just filed last month. So, and I actually, Charlie and I were able to have another conversation about this. And when we looked at results, mental health, faith, and one more is, so we're not looking at the typical results because there were no PATs, there were no diploma results to look at. So faith, mental health, and there was one more, Charlie, it's escaping me, that we were.
First Nation, Métis, Inuit.
Right, yeah. Our division goals for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. So those three goals, they're very important. They're not as much consultation as compared to other years when we look at the results of everything. So if we have 3 trustees who are in favor of moving forward in some form of consultation process at this time. And as well, when we postponed our school council meeting from the fall, we said we would look at COSC through the lens of consultation. So we deferred that option. So anyhow, in the conversation, Charlie, does that give you enough to kind of go forward with? And would, if you're able to come back with a proposal in January, would that be enough time, or?
So if I'm hearing correctly, then I would put forward a method and proposal for a virtual community consultation, bring that to the board in January. That's doable.
Yeah, okay. It doesn't have to be all the details, just something you think that would work and people would be willing to participate in and not take up, meaningful input, meaningful consultation. Okay.
Now, Madam Chair,
Go
there was
ahead,
one
Doug.
thing that we didn't talk about. Last, I remember we talked about bringing out our FNMI rep. What was that discussion about?
The First Nations Métis.
Yeah, rep. What was the discussion from Long Range?
Yeah, Trustee Sirois?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I did bring that up. We're going to be discussing it in the January meeting.
Okay.
We're going to review the benefits and if the trustee, if we want a trustee on representing the board.
Okay.
And how many First Nation students we have. And Charlie is going to prepare background for that.
Okay, but there should be no reason why how many First Nation students we have. We already have one agreement. The way that legislation is written, if you have agreement, and we already have one agreement with it. So for us, it's pretty much not optional because we have an agreement with Max. And Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong on that. And we do have few students, both in Wetaskiwin and in Panoka, and as well as Drayton Valley. And we know, just like Ed explained, right, we are down in some of those students, even though because of the pandemic, but we know things will get normalized and we'll get them back. So they may need a voice, the way the registration is written, as somebody from supporting that voice for those population.
Okay, Charlie?
Just by way of answering a couple of your questions there, Trustee Afon, it is an option. It's not required. It is only a First Nations trustee. It's not a Métis or Inuit trustees, and it's only with nations that we have an agreement with. So Drayton Valley would not apply because we have no agreements with First Nations in Drayton Valley, but we do with Musqueam. So the discussion in January, as Trustee Sirois said, will revolve around, do we want a trustee representative from Musqueam? And I've been tasked by Long Range Planning to provide background documentation for trustees to read prior to the board meeting, where that discussion will happen in January.
Okay, but I'm just throwing it out there that we don't have to limit ourselves. As we do know, any Indigenous person is an Indigenous person, and we have few of them around the schools, so we have to be mindful of that. Even though it's optional, the legislation is encouraging that we bring some of those in our fold to help our processes and support the need of those communities. So I'm just putting out there that we need to be mindful of those circumstances. Okay, so we'll see it in January. Thank you.
Okay, good. Is that everything, Trustee Sirois?
That's it.
Okay. And I believe we're at lunch break. So we will come back to 5.8 after lunch. Are we all good to come back at 12:30? Or does everybody want 12:45?
I'm very close to my kitchen, so it's
Kitchen?
half an hour is good.
12:30.
12:30?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, see you guys in a bit.
Sure.
12:30?
12:30, yeah.
Okay, thank you.